All right, good morning and welcome to the VIPC. Today is March 27th, and our top stories this week in business aviation include Trump's new pick for the FAA administrator and how aircraft tracking that was meant for safety is now being used to send you bills. Your hosts today include yours truly, Jessie Naor, as always, and our co-host today is Greg Jarrett. Greg, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jessie. Thank you for having me on.
And
It's a
by
real
the
pleasure.
morning for me, it'll be evening for you by the time this thing comes
Yes,
out. So
yes.
a little different time
Some
zones.
time zone challenges all the way across the other side of the world.
Nice.
That makes it fun.
All right, folks, sit back, buckle up, and let's take off. All right, Greg. So, I thought we'd start this out today. We always have different guests from all sorts of backgrounds on the show. I don't think we've had a tech entrepreneur on the show yet. So, you might be our first techie. So, we just wanted to, do a quick dive with you. Like, what's going on in your world? What's the latest and greatest in biz av tech? And what's going on?
Well, obviously, whenever you talk about tech these days, there's AI baked into the conversation somewhere. You can't skip that. So there's a bit of stuff happening there. I'll cover that last. What we're seeing a lot from our clients is the ability to present things digitally to their clients. So digital quotes, digital flight briefs, digital contracts. They're trying to do this stuff on their phone. And this sounds like old news to everyone. It's like, yeah, sure, everything can happen on the mobile, right? But it can't. There's still a lot of things that happen in BizAv that are just, there's a lot of things to put together and there's not enough real estate on the screen on a phone. So we're getting a lot of requests to do digital things that work really nice. We're seeing a lot of people paying more attention to marketing spend, so tracking their analytics. Again, this is kind of old news for the rest of the world. Like, how do you track your inbound leads and your landing pages and that kind of stuff? And BizAv is always a few years behind everyone else, but
Yeah.
we're seeing more requests for, hey, we need to track this Google Ads campaign and where the leads came from. And to me, that just says that people are getting more conscious of where are they spending their money? Is it effective? Are they getting the return that they want on this information? And so, yes, they're a couple of years behind, but I'm really happy that people are thinking about that because it means that they're focusing on getting the best value for money on where they spend their marketing dollars. That
Well, and it's a
leads,
lot more complicated these days too, because you talk about marketing. It used to be pretty simple. You slapped a, advertisement in Charter Hub magazine or wherever, and people
right?
got to know who you are. Now it's like there's so many digital channels, there's influencers, it's like getting so complicated. So I can see
Yeah,
how the tech side is trying to come to the rescue on that one.
yeah. It's like, where are you going to spend the money now? And so that leads into AI because people are starting to use ChatGPT instead of Google search. So the spend on Google Ads is gonna rebalance into something else, and we don't know what that looks like yet. But if my own family is starting to use ChatGPT instead of Google search, and the benchmark really is if your parents or your grandparents are starting to use ChatGPT, then that's the tipping point of stuff changing. And so
Changing.
where's that spend on Google Ads going to go if ChatGPT isn't doing advertising, which they might do. We don't know what they're going to do yet, how they're going to make their money. So it's sort of like watch this AI space in terms of how do people get their information and how do you bump yourself to the top of the list in an AI computer? I don't know the answer to that yet, but it's something that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and how much, of we've been playing this SEO game for the last, 20 years, trying to get your, listing as the first one on the page rank. I
Yeah,
don't know how much that matters anymore. It's going to really be about quality of content.
yeah,
What's going to get the AI bot to say, this is the best source for this information?
yeah.
It's a different world.
Yeah, I've been wondering, like, can you feed information into AI just by asking it the right questions and the right prompts and saying, "Hey, have you looked at this resource?" and sending it a link to your landing page that it might distribute to other people. So,
Yeah.
interesting experiments to play.
No, for sure. Actually, I got that on the other day. I was like uploading something to YouTube, it's one of these shows, and it said, "Do you want to use this to train AI?" And I was like, "I guess, yeah, sure."
Sure.
But also, like, what's the downside there?
Yeah, you're giving away some information, and that sort of that AI conversation, the other thing I meant to say was we're obviously heavily partnered with Salesforce as our back end platform. They are huge on AI, and so they're moving into this thing they call agent force, which is agents doing things for you. And the reason that's important is I feel like they're a few years ahead of the curve on decision making in how they structure their platform. So they're internally, we've started seeing messages from them that contain this phrase, the digital labor revolution. So they're starting to see money coming from these agents that you will pay them for per conversation, they call it, with an agent. So think of
Mhm.
an agent as something that performs a task, and you pay it $1 or $2 per task that's performed. Suddenly you're not looking at humans anymore with user licenses. You're looking at how many thousands of tasks are you going to perform a month, or what do you need to do to do the work. And so that rebalancing of how you pay for SaaS products might change. It's early days and they're still figuring it out, even to the point where there's been rumors, and this is rumors. This is not something I can put it in concrete, but I've seen questions that are like, are they going to change their name to Agent Force? Because they see this shift from Salesforce as, your salespeople, your sales tool, into Agent Force, where it's a completely different world of agents doing things, not just sales things, but other tasks that you're doing in your company and achieving
Yes.
outcomes. So it's early days, but it's things to just watch and be aware of in the tech space.
Yeah, and even I mean, from your bottom line perspective, it's is it going to be full time people and licenses in the future, or it's going to be API calls and all the other data costs that are starting to pile up? And how do you forecast it?
If you can pay agents to do things 24/7, then that's probably going to be a lot more effective than people doing 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, there'll still be plenty of mom and pop shops out there still signing
totally.
contracts on paper.
Totally. This industry, as you know, it takes a long time to shift. It's
That's
trying to get people to take on the technology of shifting into a new world and a new way of doing business. I think BizAv is one of the slowest. The only one I can think of that's slower is maybe banking and maybe
the
the
yachting
FAA, which we're
industry,
going to get into.
super yachts. That's the
Super
other one.
yachts.
I will
That's the other
say
one.
super yachts, the yachting industry in general is just slightly behind aviation, So we have a little bit going for us.
That makes it feel fast. So I like that. That's good. Yeah.
Well, before we move to our next topic, you did talk about something. For those who don't know, Greg's in Australia, down
Yes.
under over there, and you were mentioning something pretty cool going on in the helicopter space.
Yeah, so we've down in Australia, there's a company called McDermott Aviation based in Queensland, and they've got a huge fleet of helicopters. They do a lot of search and rescue and firefighting and passenger transport. But one of their big things is that they operate the Bell 214 ST, the super transporter. So they're the biggest operator of the ST in the world, and they've now got this type certificate, and they're going to start remanufacturing that aircraft for heavy lift and firefighting capabilities. And it's an extremely effective aircraft. They've had it for about 20 years, I think, and they've slowly built up their fleet and their operational capabilities. And they're just seeing that this machine is so much more effective because it can carry so much payload. It can fill really, really quickly, and it's a really versatile machine. And so when you're doing water bombing of fires, it can quickly go from one pond or one lake, one creek to the fire and back and forth, and it can carry huge loads and dump them really, really quickly. So they've been doing that. Australia's got a huge scope for bushfires, as you probably know, similar to California and other parts of the US. They operate these aircraft in Greece as well. So every summer in Greece has huge bushfires. They're over there every year. So they've now got the type certificate to go and remanufacture this aircraft and bring it back into production because it's such a powerful machine that it just made sense from a commercial point of view.
Yeah, sometimes the old airframes really have kind of it's the proven technology. I think that's that's the Huey, right? In
Yeah,
U.S. military terms, yeah,
yeah.
that's
It was a version of the Huey and twin engine and just super lift, and you can put people in it. Whatever you want goes in it. It can lift, it can carry,
yeah.
and really versatile machine. So watch out for that in the firefighting, water bombing space.
Yeah. I mean, it's even like at Verticon this year, someone was talking to me that there's just not a lot of innovation anymore. We covered the R88 coming out, which is exciting, but that's kind of one of the first real clean sheet design helicopters we've seen in a while. And I
Yeah.
don't really see any plans to do too many new things in that space. I think it's so expensive to certify. The rules are much more complicated these days. So probably won't be the end of aircraft resurrections in the future, if I had to guess.
It makes sense. Like this legacy airframe that works. It's a proven airframe. It's a proven structure. It's got the compliance. It makes a lot of sense to go and refit these things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Glad to see that Australia is doing neat stuff in the aviation space.
yeah.
But so our next story, the FAA, I was a little bummed to hear it just because I loved the interim FAA administrator because he was from
Mm,
our space, from business aviation.
yeah.
Chris with NBAA had been over there. But Trump has now made his new pick. And this is Brian Bedford. He does have a lot of experience as an entrepreneur, but a lot more on the airline side. So that's good. Glad we have a pilot and an airline person. Wish we had a biz av person, but it seems like he's got his head on his shoulders.
I think it's going to be tough to find someone better than him. You've got to have someone who's conscious of both the entire industry, but commercial aviation is huge. So he seems
Yes.
like the right person. He's got the right background. He's got the. I think if you're stepping into that job, you've got to have the contextual knowledge, and he's got decades of context behind him.
Right.
And just the fact that he's accepting that job and going for it, that's probably one of the toughest jobs in the world right now. And talking about modernizing legacy systems, the FAA has a lot of legacy systems, and someone prepared to take on that role they've got to have a lot of courage and a lot of background and a lot of insight. And so I think, look, anyone who's saying yes to that role is brave and probably has the right level of expertise
Yeah.
to make a really good job of it.
And I hope, really a good political animal because here in the US, that's obviously the game.
Yes.
We know who's president for the next 3.5 years or so at this point. But elections are right around the corner. And unfortunately, FAA is one of those that just gets pulled, in every political direction.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
hope we can get a long-term one. That's what the FAA really needs, and it's really struggled to
Exactly.
to keep someone for a long
Yeah,
time.
the election cycle is short compared to what the FAA is doing. It's like modernizing their systems they might want to do it within 4 years, but you try migrating a big enterprise company, just their CRM system, that's a 4-year project. If you try and do the entire FAA and all the systems and all the data that they have and all the people and all the safety impacts,
Mhm.
like to me, that's a 10-year job. And they will obviously try to do it faster, but that's a 10-year cycle of this thing, this thing, this thing, and certain things have to happen before the other thing can happen.
Yeah.
And it's yeah,
No, it's tough. And I think Boeing, oversight at Boeing is clearly a big priority. Not that the
yeah,
Australians care that much about it, but as Americans we do. We want our Boeing back in good graces on the world stage. But actually I was listening to something this morning. I think it was CNBC. There was the AirCap guys, one of the biggest leasing companies in
mm,
the entire world. They have said that they've seen better production results from Boeing over the last 2 years. So I think we're getting there, but the FAA still needs to really step up on the accountability side and make sure they have good oversight that is within their spectrum of knowledge. I think unfortunately what's happened is we got really, really smart people in these companies and you just can't hire the same people at the FAA for the same salaries. So
yeah,
someone's got to figure that out.
yeah. And I think it's nice to see some positive news about Boeing. They've been in the dumps for so long. I still think that it's them and Airbus when you're talking about big aircraft. Anyone who's going to try and Boeing is one of those companies that, and it's don't jinx me for saying this, but it's too big to fail because you can't have a company like this that's manufactured aircraft and has to maintain them and keep things going. You can't have that fall apart. So, and there's no competition on the horizon for the next 20, 30 years. And you think about all of the safety steps that have to happen for a new competitor to come into that market. And if all it takes for Boeing is to have an obstacle is some unfortunate crashes, but any new entrant into that market has to go through those steps. And yes, you're asking a lot of questions of Boeing, but they've been around for a long time and they've been through those steps. And so,
Right.
I think they're extremely important company in the entire global aviation market. It sort of brings me to that eVTOL space where the manufacturing is still taking place, but the safety and the compliance aspects of it are yet to be known. And that entire industry has to go through the next 20 or 30 years of what happens when you have an accident. What's the fallout? What's the process for improving
Mhm.
and setting new standards in manufacturing and compliance and reporting and just documentation of these incidents
Right.
and investigation? Like that whole journey is yet to take place for the VTOL industry.
Yeah.
So it's a long, long journey. Put that in Boeing's perspective, that as long as they make the right decisions now and for the long term, then they'll be in a really good place 5 or 10 years from now. Yeah.
Well, and as you were saying that, it's tying into what we're going to talk about next, but like I just feel like it's worth bringing up right now. This
Mm,
is a bit dark. Obviously, accidents are tragic, and we feel for families. But in the aviation space, we feel that we also have to deal with the impacts. And one thing that's happening right now, and one thing that the eVTOL companies have not had to deal with yet, is product liability,
mm,
wrongful death suits and claims. That's another thing that's affecting the helicopter industry too. Now, there's a lot of lawsuits that go back and forth. When something happens, Boeing's obviously had things happen, it's impacted them, but the eVTOLs have not even had that yet. Not only do they have to produce and make these aircraft, but what happens when things start going wrong? It gets very expensive to
yeah.
run these companies. There was an Alaskan crash a couple months ago,
Mm,
killed all 10 people on board in Nome, Alaska. They were flying under Part 135. And again, tragic situation. Apparently, the aircraft was overweight by
hmm
1,000 pounds.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, not good. Apparently, there was some piece of equipment that was like a 900 pound that maybe wasn't accounted for. Still,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
kind of some of your basics. It's tragic to hear that happened.
Totally. Yeah.
But that's going to have some significant impacts on us. We've looked at insurance costs going up almost 40% over the last couple of years. I cannot imagine what's coming for us in the next year after everything that's happened just in January alone of this year.
Yeah. It's going to get really expensive from the point of view of just maintaining safe operations.
Mhm.
And that uh, it's unfortunate, and we feel for all the families that are affected by that. But we also then look at that and step back and go, an incident happens, and we can have investigators go to the site, and we can know things like that aircraft was 1,050. The fact that you can go in and figure that out afterwards means that we've had the right processes in place to generate that information after something happens. We've got the paperwork. The pilot has filled things out correctly. There's the black box. There's all these other measuring sticks on the aircraft that are there to, unfortunately, tell us things when something goes wrong, but tell us things when things don't go wrong as well.
Mhm.
And so, I'm comforted by the fact that we've got the benchmarks in place, and we've got the information that we can go and figure out what happened and prevent this from happening again in the future.
Fair.
1,058 pounds is a lot for a Cessna 208. Uh, it's horrible, but hopefully everyone flying a 208 or any kind of light aircraft out there is paying attention to the outcome of that investigation.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be years ago we would have not even known, what actual causes were. So I guess that's silver lining. But it's so disappointing to see, like, there's because these multiple, we were still waiting for final reports to come out, but it looks like in most of these cases it's pretty simple error stuff that shouldn't have happened, and should have been caught. And I'm looking at the DCA crash specifically. One of the families is now seeking a $250 million wrongful death claim, which I kind of understand. Like, that's a huge number, but I think they're going after not only the military, the FAA. There's a lot of people involved in this suit potentially, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And I don't blame them because there were a lot of things there that just seemed like they should not have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how do they? I haven't looked a lot into that story, but where does the figure of 250 million come from? It Do you know
Some
more
of
about it?
some of it is, the income of the person. I hate to say it, like,
And
this is
potential
really
income.
it's really dark stuff, but I mean, this is part of what we deal with in aviation and aviation insurance. It used to be, the value of a life was like $1 million. I hate to say that, but in insurance terms, I think that number is totally different now. A lot of judges are, awarding damages to punish people to keep them
Yeah.
from doing things again. But that also means these claims are just going higher and higher and higher. And insurance companies are like, we don't know what our liability is anymore because we used to have this box number of, okay, if something happens, then this. Now it's if
Yeah.
something happens,
Yeah.
we don't know where it ends.
Yeah. Is that person an owner of 50 companies? Do they, have all these revenue producing assets,
Mhm.
and what's the impact on the people around them? So it's a difficult thing to know.
And how much does the judge want to inflict maximum pain on a manufacturer or, whoever else was responsible? Those are the
Yeah.
things that we just don't know anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's ultimately responsible for these issues? And if something comes down to, yes, it's human factors causing the accident, but if there could have been things done to prevent the human error side of it, then those things we need to pay attention to those as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't, we can't always blame the pilot too. That's like the
Oh,
biggest
exactly.
mistake
Yeah.
is, they're the person who is finally there in the last moment, but there's
Yeah.
so much in their environment and their training and, the conditions that they were in that, we all have to take a look at. But man, it's been a rough year so far. I'm hoping for some blue skies over the next few months. Brutal. All right, so next story, a little lighter, not so much
Yeah.
death talk, which we like. Aviation.
Add to the whole podcast on that.
Yeah, so in Montana, I found this one really interesting. I've heard this popping up, and you're a data guy too, so you'll probably have a
Yeah.
lot to weigh in here. But so ADSB, which is the air traffic tracking system in the United States, that the FAA came out with to make sure everyone knows where everyone's flying. Great
Yeah.
plan, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people didn't want to do it for a long time because of situations like this, which is where FBOs are using this tracking data to actually charge people fees and send them invoices. And a lot of small aircraft people are like, hey, this is not what we signed up for. I invested in this technology for safety, not for a signature to get their $50. That's me.
So, because I look at this from the data perspective, and I don't understand, I don't have insight into the FBO perspective or the aircraft owner perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're getting a bill for the landing that actually occurred, what's the problem? So if the data is giving us the real insight into who is flying where at what time and at what aircraft weight, then as long as the billing matches up with that, that makes sense to me. You shouldn't be able to obscure that through the restriction of data. And obviously, I have a single perspective. I'm a data person, but I look back at the tech industry and what things like open source data have done to help advance technology and the systems that we use. And you look at ADSB data is about as raw as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
It's geographic coordinates of a thing moving at a point in time, and that's it. And the amount of things that we can do with that data and extrapolate different things and correlate it with other data sets and use this to work out what's actually happening across multiple different geographic areas or technologies or aircraft platforms, and that kind of stuff is really, really useful. It's a really good example of something being developed for a single purpose originally, which is to enhance safety and visibility of these aircraft. But it's because of the rawness of that data and the ability of people to use technology to access it and do other things with it, that there's so many positives that have come out of ADSB data that
Yeah.
it would be a real shame to see that being restricted in some way so that it's no longer open source.
Yeah. Well, the cat's out of the bag at this point. I don't think people foresaw, how this was going to work. So basically, what's happened is it's this independent broadcasting system. So you could stand outside with a little antenna and you can
Mm,
start picking up signals from it. And
yeah,
I think at the time when this was being developed, no one thought about, oh, a whole bunch of people, thousands of, you know, little amateur kids that want to track airplanes are going to go out there and set up thousands and thousands of
yeah,
antennas all over the country. No
yeah,
one saw that coming. So I don't think the people who signed up for like ADSB tracking didn't think to themselves, one day everyone's going to see this information. And it's been a
yeah.
challenge not only for, private flyers like, Elon Musk and all those people, but also
Mm,
the military. ADSB was part of this crash in DCA as well.
yeah,
But the thing is now it's out there, it's public, it is what it is. And I agree with you. Like, I mean, if you landed there, you probably have to pay the bill.
yeah. And if you know that aircraft is is max takeoff weight is X number of pounds, then there's not a lot you can argue with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get the privacy aspect of it, but I just think there's so many positives that have come out of ADS-B that
Yeah.
it's
Well,
grown
look,
beyond its original intent, and that's okay for me.
AOPA has a habit of kind of pushing these crazy things out there. Like they tried to get like free parking spaces at all airports for GA aircraft like last year or something. I'm like, no, that's not gonna
Yeah,
like it's
yeah,
not happening. These are businesses. They need to make money. Like,
yeah. Doesn't come free. Yeah.
no, no. So, but I don't know. We'll see. So maybe in Montana, this is where this bill is being proposed. Maybe you won't get tracked, but everywhere else, you probably will be. So,
I don't know what Montana is like from BizAv, but I'd imagine it's such a big open space that it's a bit like Australia. It's a lot of big open space and not much in between.
yeah, I do have to wonder how many, airplanes are landing at airports out there, just like never registering and
Yeah.
are getting away with murder. I don't know. Or maybe there's some other aspect to this I'm missing. I don't know. If anyone's listening and has like input, please like let us know and we'll cover it on the show next time.
Yes, yes. My limited perspective and limited knowledge on it is not something to use in a dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's everything on this show because we just shoot from the hip. So who knows what we're saying. But, and this next story is not necessarily biz av. Actually, it was kind of a slow biz av week in general. So it's a lot of just general aviation stuff
Yeah.
today. But speaking of detection, I just had to bring this story in. First of all, because I'm a space nerd and also because I thought it was the craziest thing I've seen in a long time. But California this week, they signed a $95 million contract with a space company that is detecting methane gas plumes from the space in the state of California. And they're using this information to find companies that are releasing too much methane gas, whether it's a plant or a
Wow.
ranch or what have you. And I was like, this is wild. Now we're tracking like gas emissions from space.
It's it's amazing. It's crazy, but it's amazing. It's
It's
like we can
amazing.
track the methane gas, and you've got to exclude all the farms and the cows out of that somehow. But if you look at the pipelines and the things that actually should be controlling their emissions and thinking about how they limit their exposure here, I think it's amazing. This is just a really good example of what we can do with technology if we have some data available to us.
Yeah. Well, and apparently, so this is an open source platform, not open source, but they have a portal online where they're releasing a lot of this information for people that are interested in it. A carbon mapper. I'll put a link
Wow.
to it
Yeah.
in the notes. But what's interesting is that in Texas, there was a leak from the Permian Basin pipeline. The
Wow.
people on that website saw the leak, reported it to Texas regulators, and the company went out and fixed it, which like who knows how long that would have taken had they not
Yeah.
been observing this stuff. It's
That's
wild.
really cool. It's a bit like in tech there's the bug bounty hunting. It's white hat hackers will be engaged by a company to try and hack into their systems and figure out what's wrong with them and say, hey, you need to patch this hole because there's a 0-day vulnerability or some other type of vulnerability. It's a bit similar to that. It's like you have this open source data and you can try and penetrate these systems, and if you find the holes, you're actually mitigating the risk of threat to everyone. And
Mm.
so I think it's another really good example of how this data and people doing smart things with it can make a really big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, but for business folks out there, it's not only the regulators you got to watch out for now, it's the
true.
online vigilantes that are going to be, sorting through data or online activists, that are looking for this stuff. What a crazy world we're living in right now.
It will be the sole entrepreneur who's extremely good with technology who can make money out of bug bounty hunting and methane hunting and figuring out holes in infrastructure that exist in our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. Well, who knows what's next? But if you want to look at this methane tracker, it's pretty interesting. But I also don't know like how California can give them $100 million for this. I wouldn't be cool with that as a citizen, but I mean, whatever. I don't live there, so it's their choice.
It's a lot of money. Anything you do in space is like $100 million. So maybe that was
Yeah.
how they figured out the price. It was 100
Yeah.
million and discount it by 5.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the pod today. We always love to keep things short and sweet for you. I'm sorry it wasn't as much private aviation today, but interesting stories nonetheless, especially tech stuff. Don't forget to subscribe to our Weekly Digest and make sure you leave us a comment and a like. And we'll see you next time on the VIP seat.